Fears are growing in Uganda of an escalating crackdown on dissent. In just the past few months, opposition leader Kizza Besigye has been charged with treason. His lawyer was imprisoned, and several activists have been arrested for criticizing the government online. DW correspondent Julius Mugambwa has more from Kampala on what critics are calling a dangerous new phase of repression.
Arrested for speaking her mind in the first week of this year, police detained journalist and activist Agatha Atuhaire.
You should allow citizens to express themselves because what is happening is not right. And I am sure you police officers to know that it is not right.
She and 7 others were protesting the sentencing of a human rights lawyer by a military court. She was charged with being a public nuisance. Uganda's youth minister told DW the charges were justified.
People have a right to demonstrate as long as they seek for permission to demonstrate, because we don't want public nuisance. Also, the public doesn't want to deter other people doing their business.
Atuhaire was released on bail after a few hours, but will have to face the charges later. She's used to standing up to authorities. Her activism earned her the International Women of Courage Award from the US State Department.
There's full of impunity in this country, disregard for the rule of law, but the extent it gets every day, it's really a sad state of events. It's a dangerous trend. It moves from bad to worse.
President Yoweri Museveni has been in power for 39 years. International organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch accuse him of intensifying repression and abusing his authority to silence critics. The recent arrest of longtime political rival Dr. Kizza Besigye and his trial by a military court, despite being a civilian, drew criticism from rights bodies and legal experts.
We have had court decisions that have ruled in favor of the civilians, saying you cannot try civilians in military courts. The only thing that the judiciary must do is to prioritize human rights cases. Someone show implication because they touch on people's lives, of survival, and seem to live another day.
Agatha says speaking out against Museveni comes at a heavy price.
Now we have so many people that have been sent to jail because they said something on TikTok that the president and his family don't like. So many. We are actually doing an investigation here at Agora. We have cases of about 6 of them. One was sent to 6 years in jail.
Youth Minister Balam Barugahari denies allegations of suppressing free speech, but says wild claims against the president often made online, like a recent one saying that the president murdered an MP, were not acceptable.
Your rights have a limit. You cannot say you're right when you are accusing somebody of murder, somebody who has never killed somebody. Like I've seen four accounts today accusing Muzei and the government of killing Segirinya, someone who has had an incurable disease. I want to warn young people that you benefit nothing abusing someone who has done nothing to you. You benefit nothing abusing a superior.
In the run-up to the last general elections, many opposition supporters were arrested. More than 50 people, including a child, were reported killed when a government crackdown in Kampala in November 2020 got out of control. Some families received government compensation. Atuhaire fears more arrests and violence in the coming year as the 2026 election looms, and all indications suggest Museveni will run again.
Winnie Byanyima, who we heard from earlier, is also the wife of Kizza Besigye, the abducted veteran opposition figure in Uganda. She shared her concerns about the treason charges her husband faces in a military court.
It's unconstitutional to use a military court to try a civilian, but the government is determined to break our constitution. Under that military court, you have the same people who abducted him. He was abducted from Kenya. and brought and dumped in a military jail. The same people who abducted him are now also his accusers, and they are also his judge. The president's son, who is the chief of the defense forces, has been out there tweeting that he wants him hanged by the 9th of May. He has even chosen the venue for hanging him. And he's the head of this military court. It reports to him. So where's the chance for him to even be heard?
Right. Across the border in Kenya, there's a growing trend of what rights groups are calling transnational repression. In July last year, a group of 36 Ugandan opposition members were seized in Kenya and forcibly returned to Uganda for a terrorist trial. In October, 4 Turkish refugees were abducted in Nairobi and sent back to Turkey. Then there was Kizza Besigye's arrest in November. And this month, the Tanzanian journalist and activist Kizza was seized in Nairobi, where she'd moved 4 years ago after fleeing her home country. Besigye believes the Kenyans were working with the Tanzanian government and had a plan to send her back.
Based on the fact that they really wanted access to my phone, I have a feeling that some of the things that I report on is now giving them sleepless nights. So that was one of the reasons they wanted. There was a point in time when I was convinced that I was about to be taken across, and I knew the minute I crossed, you would never hear from me again. I'll become another poster. So I will never stop, never, ever stop. And if this was done, whether to intimidate me, to really harm me, that will never stop me. I will continue continuously to speak out.
I spoke to Roland Ebole, Amnesty International's East Africa researcher. He told me more about this pattern of state-led abductions and arrests in the region.
The pattern is that the persons that are being abducted, especially in cross-border abductions, are persons that are very critical of governments in their country. However, in Kenya, we have a series of abductions that now have included leaders in the much-known Gen Z protests that occupied parliament and other government offices last year.
Right. And that's a problem, and it cannot be accepted as the norm. So what specific steps should East African governments take to address these human rights concerns?
The right to expression, the freedoms and the right to free expression, the freedom and the right to peaceful assembly, association, are rights that are guaranteed under the constitutions of the 3 countries, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And for the state to really avoid a situation whereby persons are criticizing or people seen to criticize the state, then they really need to be accountable and transparent. And so when citizens come and want to criticize state for misgivings or certain accountable or accountability questions, including corruption, including human rights violation, then the state responds by arbitrary arrests, abductions, and other forms of enforced disappearance. That goes against international standards. It goes against the constitutions that these countries have for themselves found for their people.
It is these same governments that are being accused of state abductions. So how can they be expected to tackle the problem? What more needs to be done to make sure that they are really addressing this when they are to be blamed? At least that's the way some people see it.
It is more than that, because all these states have got independent institutions. In Kenya, there is the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. These countries have Human Rights Commission, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, the Tanzania Commission on Human Rights and Good Governance. Kenya, you have the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. These are national human rights institutions that are there to really speak on the rights of the citizens, so that when security forces and other authorities of the state, go beyond, their mandate or, act in excesses, then the regulation should be by these institutions. Also, we have, politicians, we have leaders of these countries that should come out and condemn whatever it is that is happening, considering that we have been calling them into question, and they, like in Kenya, the President William Ruto has accepted that abductions indeed are happening. Right. And said that he is going to stop these abductions. You cannot stop what you have not begun. So again, we are calling on government to bring an end to abductions, else they will actually border on international crimes. And some of these cases can be presented to courts beyond these countries.
Right. Roland Ebole from Amnesty International. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.